natural law expert, millennial, classical, liberal, all-round good guy, and other side regular commentator Rob McMullen joins us in the studio, mate. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
Wanted to get you in to talk a little bit about a very sensitive topic that's somewhat risky to talk about, but the feminization, and we're not talking about women specifically, but just the general feminization of Australian culture, Australian politics, Australian law, Australian everything, and the impact that that's having on our culture. But first, a drinking game.
That was what I was going to open with. I identified a new drinking game, and I'm ready actually because you might have thought this was a long black, but it's heavily laced.
Oh, okay.
It's heavily laced with a good single malt. No, not really. But you can take a shot every time a Labor politician's social media profile is laid out something like father to, husband to, passionate squash player. Oh, and I happen to be the minister for blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, I have this really responsible adult grown-up role too.
That's right.
Let's have a look at some of these. I mean, I can't believe it. You put them all together. It just cracks me up.
That's right.
Let's have a look at the Chris Bowen one first of all. So the first thing that Chris Bowen's profile says, this is on Twitter, I assume, says husband to Beck, dad to Grace and Max, and then Minister for Climate Change and Energy, living on the land of the Cabrogal people of the Darug Nation, lover of Labradors. Aww.
How adorable.
Oh, how adorable you are.
Isn't that
Chris
what
Bowen.
matters?
Hey?
Isn't that what matters?
Queensland Premier Chuckles Miles. Let's have a look at his. Oh, yeah. First of all, he's a husband. He's a husband before he's anything else.
That's right.
Dad of 3, Broncos fan. Oh, well, that's almost not allowed. Blah, blah, blah. Queensland's new Premier. Yeah, okay. And Jason Clare, MP. Atticus and Jack's dad. Okay. Louisa's husband. All right. Minister for Education. Blah, blah, blah. What's so bad about this? I mean, why is this a thing, and why should we even give a damn?
Well, the frequency with which that same formula was used, it just looked to me like the hashtag care social media TM package has been, filtered down from social media HQ. It's the cynical, look at me, Feely feels like I'm a husband, I'm a dad, I love my Labradors. That's more important than my responsibilities to society almost, because it comes first.
And you would define that as kind of the traditional masculine side of what I do for a living as a contributor to the world, my output, my masculine output versus my feminine nurturing sort of side.
There's the idea that there's our personal lives and there are our societal and professional lives. And it's a bit of a stereotype, but I think, the feminisation, it lives in around the home and the home life, whereas as a fairly red-blooded male, I don't really care. How are you going to run society properly? That's more my prerogative.
Yeah, well, that's what we're employing them to do. We're not employing them to tell us how
right.
much of a great husband, or we're not marrying them, I suppose.
That's right.
The award has to go, though, to Tony Burke.
Oh, Tony Burke.
We've got to put Tony Burke's up. This is a classic, man. The first thing he says is Sky's husband, dad and stepdad, Labor MP, in spare time, guitar, piano, poetry, theatre. Love poetry and theatre myself, but, that's not really what I'd be putting on my profile. Kayaking and national parks. Okay, whoop-de-doo. But yeah, here it is. It's like it's a little emasculating, right? To say could you imagine? I mean, let's just put this in. There's a lot of women out there probably raging at us right now, but just stop for a minute, ladies.
We mean well, ladies.
And let's have a little think about this for a second. Imagine if the first thing that we thought you should put on your thing was Rob's wife or Damien's wife, instead of what you do for a living.
Imagine leading with that with a CV for a professional job.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, the first thing you should know about me is that,
Yeah. I'm Rob McMullen's wife.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not going to work. So, okay, so it's a little bit emasculating. It sort of speaks to a cultural shift that's occurred in Australia, which a lot of people might say is a nice, touchy-feely thing, but it has a dark side.
Well, look, that's the thing with virtue signalling, is that you can hack the virtue because it's just a signal. You don't necessarily need to be demonstrating the virtues you're putting forward.
Right.
And so that was another thing I wanted to talk about is as interesting I'll say silly as I find it, leading with the personal lives in the professional sphere. I think you go to work for a bunch of guys, and it's good to keep the personal at home. Like, it's great for the people in your life, but in the professional or political sphere, in the sphere that we're paying taxes for these people to do these jobs, that's not the first thing that I need from them.
No.
I really need the job done well.
Yeah.
And then we get into that area of virtue signaling. Well, they're signaling this personal feel-good personability, is that the word? They're bringing their personal lives to make people feel good and connect with them on a personal level. But as a virtue signal, like I said, the reality doesn't necessarily have to match up with what they're signaling. And
it quite often doesn't.
It quite often doesn't. And I thought it was interesting to juxtapose that with the reality in Australia for people who want to have families or who have young families. And unfortunately, despite all the cynical social media virtue signalling, the reality is often quite different for people who have families under Labor.
Well, you are a millennial, middle-class, small business person, successful but small business person, average middle-class sort of income. You're successful, you're doing well, but you're feeling the pain of trying to have a young family or having a young family in Australia in this time and owning a home.
Well, I think a lot of people are, is the point. A lot of people are. And, the first thing I pointed to is there's been so much talk about birth rates. Can we go there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how cynical for these politicians to signal, well, I'm somebody's dad and I've got a family, but the reality is that less people than ever before are actually having families.
Let's have a look at these birth rates. Let's have a look at the chart now. This is a chart from IFM, an investment group, IFM Investors. They put data together from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the World Bank. And they've come out with a number that's pretty startlingly low and a bit lower than other estimates, but it's saying it's a legitimate analysis they've done here. And they're saying that the birth rate is 1.06 now. Now, 1.06 means that every year per 100 people in Australia, there are 1.06 births. And that is not a sustainable replacement level. Like, you've got to be at about 2.2 or 2.1 to be replacement.
2.1.
Right. Okay. So it's sort of like 1 to replace mum, 1 to replace dad, and 0.1 for
That's right.
for to cover any problems that might occur on the way. And we used to be at around, if you look at back, this chart goes back to 1950s. So it used to be around about 2.3, just under 2.3, coming down to the 2 level at around about 1975, and then just plummeting since. And now here we are at sort of 1, which means we're going to die out in a couple of generations, as original Australians at least. When I say original Australians, I better clarify that. But
yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
Australians probably, if you would say, were second generation or more.
Yeah.
Right. Families.
Well, as we have it now, we have a native Australian population. We have Australians now. And they're not having sufficient children to sustain the nation. And so obviously the Labor are reacting to this by bringing in record numbers of migrants to keep the population up. But I mean, that's going to have a whole array of effects, and it's going to create drastic changes to the country. So
let's have a look at that too. Australian net overseas migration chart, this one from Macro Business. And everyone's been talking about this, but we are at net migration of 520,000 plus for 2023, or 500. I had the exact number there somewhere. Here we go. So our population now is 26.97 million. As at 31 December 2023. So it's definitely 27 million now. That was 2.5% higher than a year earlier. But the growth was driven by net overseas migration of 547,000 in 2023. And net is number of people in minus number of people out. So it's a pretty high number for 1 year. And number of new people in, I think, was even higher. It was like 700 and something thousand, and a million in the 18 months, I think, to now. So pretty wild number of new people coming into the country. There's only 27 million people, and we've got 1 million new people.
Well, it's unprecedented. And I don't know about you, but once I saw past the feel-good virtue signaling of the social media profiles, oh, I'm X's dad, I'm someone's husband. Well, the reality being that less people are able to have that reality than ever before.
Right.
It's quite shocking. And it's all happening under Labor's management. They're in power almost everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's a variety of economic, social, cultural issues that are contributing to that and that Labor actually contribute to. So on one hand, they're virtue signaling about family and family values and the families they have, but on the other hand, they're undercutting so many Australians' ability to have their own families,
Right.
which I think is shocking.